There's a particular kind of institutional dishonesty that doesn't require lying. It requires only the careful arrangement of true statements, sequenced to obscure what's actually happening to you. Here's how it works. Your base salary is quietly reduced, framed of course as market realignment, which sounds neutral and even responsible, like a correction towards some objective equilibrium that exists nowhere in particular. That reduction is permanent. What replaces it is a bonus structure, an incentive pool, a performance framework, call it what you like, built from an expanding architecture of metrics, thresholds, and compliance targets, many of which you'll discover midway through your first year are either moving or were never quite where you thought they were. At the end of the fiscal year, the institution tallies what it paid out in incentive compensation across its entire physician workforce, announces the figure, and publishes a press release about the record bonus earnings. The headline is technically accurate. Your bank account, however, tells a different story. The financial risk that once lived on the institution's balance sheet, the exposure of guaranteeing physician income regardless of volume, patient mix, or payer behavior, has been redistributed onto you. This is done slowly with language designed to sound collaborative, alignment, shared accountability, value-based care, partnership. What it actually means is that your income is now partially contingent on things you did not cause and cannot fix and cannot anticipate. The OR turnover delay, for example, that tanked your patient satisfaction score. The EHR interface that your system chose and you didn't. The RVU target calibrated to a staffing model that assumed full coverage you don't have. You are held accountable for the outputs of a system you do not control. And when you fall short of those thresholds, the resulting income gap is implicitly framed as a performance failure. The particular cruelty of this, and it deserves to be called that, is that it arrives precisely when you are most vulnerable. You just finished training, you're carrying debt that would be obscene in any other profession, you are learning to practice in an environment that is genuinely different from where you trained, navigating institutional culture, EMR, EHR systems, referral networks, and administrative hierarchies simultaneously. You are, by almost any measure, not in a position to push back, to negotiate hard, or to absorb income volatility without consequence. And so you sign. You sign because you need the job, because the contract is 40 pages of language that wasn't covered in residency, because the recruiter was warm and the signing bonus was real and the base salary sounded reasonable enough. The language could be protective, but it's not. What you may not have known to ask because no one taught you to ask is what the historical bonus attainment rate actually looks like. Not the ceiling, not the theoretical maximum printed on page 12, the median. What percentage of physicians at this institution, in this specialty, in this department actually hit full incentive targets in a given year? The answer, when obtainable at all, is frequently deflating. Incentive structures are not inherently corrupt. Done with genuine transparency, realistic thresholds, metrics physicians can actually influence, benchmarks that actually hold still, they can then meaningfully connect behavior to outcomes in ways that actually benefits patients. But when thresholds are set at a stretch that assumes optimal conditions, when goalposts are subject to mid-year calibration without contract renegotiation, when a significant portion of your performance is downstream of administrative and operational decisions made above you, the incentive bonus stops functioning as a reward and starts functioning as a conditional return of income that simply used to live in your base salary. That salary with extra steps and more ways to lose it. That is the situation you're in now. What makes this harder to name is that the public narrative runs in exactly the opposite direction. Physicians earn so much money. They're earning more bonus compensation than ever. And perhaps in aggregate, this is true. It's also true that aggregate figures are constructed precisely to obscure individual variance, that base salaries have compressed, and that full attainment is rare enough to constitute an outlier rather than an expectation. The public hears that doctors are doing well. The doctor, 6 months into her first attending year, is recalculating what she'll actually net after accounting for the incentive shortfall, and wondering whether she understood what she signed. She probably didn't. Most people signing their first contracts don't. Not because she's naive, but because she never was given the tools to actually do so. And because the institution knew that. This is where the frustration has to go somewhere useful, because anger without direction just burns. I've seen people on contracts where they bring an attorney to actual meeting and they're told that they won't even have the meeting with them. Their job offer is rescinded. It's coercion. They say the questions you need answered are not optional courtesies. You need the base to variable ratio in writing. You need historical attainment data, not projections, not targets, actual attainment for physicians in your role over the past 3 years. You need to know exactly which metrics determine each component of the incentive and which of those metrics lie within the operational control of a single physician versus the broader system. You need to know what happens to your bonus if benchmarks are recalibrated mid-year. You need a contract attorney who works with physicians, not a friend who happens to have a law degree. Compensation design is policy, and policy shapes behavior, and behavior shapes what happens to our patients. These are not separate categories dressed up in administrative language. They are the same thing, viewed at different altitudes. When income pressure accelerates volume, complex patients become financial friction. When satisfaction scores dominate incentive calculations, clinical judgment begins to negotiate with service optics. When documentation compliance metrics multiply, time at the screen expands and time at the bedside contracts. Less time to actually be productive. The institution is not optimizing for productivity or for what it says it's optimizing for. It's just optimizing for the CEO's bonuses. You should know what's going in. You should know that going in. You have already given an enormous amount to get here. That's not sentiment, it's an accounting fact. The trading is long, the opportunity cost is real, and the debt is not abstract. You deserve a compensation structure that is comprehensible, stable enough to plan around, and honest about what it is. That is not a radical demand. It is a minimum condition for a functional professional relationship, especially if you're moving across the country and moving your family. The fact that the industry has normalized something well below that minimum is the problem, not your expectation of better. You need to do better for yourself, and you need to stand your ground.